All right, we'll go ahead and get this started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live learning event on Grooper and Azure Document Intelligence. Our speaker for today is Dylan Greenwood. Dylan, I will kick it over to you.
Thanks, Brad. Hey, everybody. My name is Dylan Greenwood. If you don't know who I am the Director of Product Operations for Grooper here at BIS. And I wear a few hats, but my primary hat is really focused around Grooper education. I help run our education department and oversee the wiki and the Grooper University learning management system, and also stuff like we're doing today. We've actually got two series of webinars planned for this year. One I am going to be doing at the end of every month. We're calling it Dev Notes. And the purpose of this webinar series is basically to show you guys some new and upcoming features in the product. Since we've moved to web client development, the pace at which our development team have started kicking out new features has really accelerated. And, I was kind of thinking about this the other day. If you go to our What's New in 2025 wiki article, it's already out of date because so much development has been added from when we launched 2025 to today. So that's part of why we wanted to do this monthly webinar series for you guys, just to keep you informed about stuff that has been developed recently that you may not be aware of, and also, stuff that might be coming in the future as well. The second series, which is going to be in the middle of the month, every month, is going to be a series that one of our education team members, Randall Kynard, is going to deliver. And it's all going to be about moving from the thick client grouper to the web client grouper. So plenty of Grooper users, possibly some people on this webinar, are still using the Grooper thick client and haven't made the switch to the web client. And part of that may be because they're concerned that some functionality may be lost, or they just don't know how to use the web client. So he's going to be delivering a multi-part series that's all about, hey, you're used to doing things this way in the thick client. Here's how you do them in the web client. I can't remember what our first date for that is off the top of my head, but it'll be middle of February, the second week, I believe.
Yeah, it'll be 2 weeks from now, correct?
Perfect. So without any further ado, let's just get into what we're going to be talking about today, and that is Azure Document Intelligence. What Azure Document Intelligence is, it is a cloud service from Microsoft that enables optical character recognition and document analysis. If you are familiar with Grooper's current Azure OCR iteration, Document Intelligence is kind of the next level. It does basically everything that the current iteration of Azure OCR does, but better. And then also offers some very unique opportunities to use some of the document analysis capabilities of that service to further enhance our AI-enabled features. So the first thing that we need to talk about is just how you connect Grooper to Azure Document Intelligence. It's pretty easy. First thing you're going to do outside of Grooper is create a document intelligence resource in Azure. I'm not going to show you how to do that today. Just know that there is documentation on that in Azure. And it's actually really straightforward. It's among the easier Azure resources to create. Pretty much, it's as straightforward as name your resource, pick a pricing tier, and then you need to get an API key. Once you've got that created in Grooper, all you have to do is enable a new repository option to connect to that service. If you open this up, you'll see we've got a new option called Azure Document Intelligence. Its configuration is very simple. You just pop in that API key and the resource name, and you're off to the races. So once you're connected, then the question becomes, okay, well, what can Azure Document Intelligence do for me? And there are two primary constructs that utilize Azure Document Intelligence. There is an OCR engine called Azure DI-OCR, and this is what we're going to focus today on this webinar. This is going to be the main focus. Again, if you are familiar with our previous, not that one, we'll just go and reset that. Previous Azure OCR engine offering, you already know a lot of the benefits that we're going to talk about today. Just be aware that Azure DI is the new, improved, better version of Azure OCR. Okay.
Hey, Dylan.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also will throw out there, if anybody has questions, they can submit them at any time, either the Q&A or the chat box. chat box and we will answer them as they come about. Or if we don't get them as they come up, then we will definitely address them there near the end. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Perfect. Thank you, Brad. And yeah, please do feel free to ask questions. I'm probably going to be speaking to users of different familiarity with Grooper. Some of you are super familiar with it. Some of you are probably less familiar with it. If you have questions, please ask. Okay, so the construct we're going to be talking about today is our new Azure DI OCR engine. I will mention the other construct, and we will talk about this in a later webinar. It's called DI Analyze. It's an entirely separate activity that does a lot more than just OCR. One of the benefits to this document intelligence service is it does a lot of analysis about document structure, as in where is the title on this document? Where are the section headers? Where are the tables? Are there any key value pairs for structured forms that I can identify? All of that information can be gained from this new activity DI Analyze and then be utilized by our AI-enabled capabilities in Grooper, such as AI Extract. Now, I'm not going to talk about that in any more depth than just what I said right now, because I want to focus on what Azure Document Intelligence can do for OCR and how it may improve results you're possibly even getting right now using Azure. Definitely improve what you're getting if you're using traditional OCR engines like Transom. Okay, well, let's just start out in this project right here. And this is the project I built out for this webinar. And mostly it's got just some step testers and some OCR profiles that are pre-configured. So we can kind of compare and contrast different results. And I can show you the benefits that Azure DI OCR has above our previous iterations. So I'll just go ahead and go to one of these OCR profiles so that I can get to this tester and show you some documents that I've already OCR'd. So this document is one of the ones that I like to use kind of as my go-to for illustrating the benefits of Azure OCR by itself. This is obviously a very old, crummy document in a lot of different ways, right? The document itself is old, so it's a little bit degraded. The image quality is kind of bad, quite frankly. The resolution is bad. It's even probably been taken with a camera. You can see there's kind of warping of this page that wouldn't be there if you had, say, scanned this in with a flatbed scanner or a document scanner. It's just a bad document. Not only that, we got a mix of machine print and handwritten text. Traditional OCR engines like Transom do not do a very good job with these types of documents. As you can see from our results, it's mostly just garbage. We're getting some of the machine print stuff, but hardly any of that handwritten stuff because, quite frankly, traditional OCR engines just can't do it. If you know a little bit about how traditional OCR engines like Transom work, there's good reasons why it doesn't do a great job. It has to do a very, very almost rigid pixel analysis to figure out where first the lines are on an image, and then after it figures out where the lines are, figure out where each individual word is on the image, and then figure out ultimately where each individual character is on the image. So then it can say, oh, okay, well, now that I have this super, super narrowed in look, what, based off of my, training, for lack of a better word, what character does that match? And in doing that, you have to break up this document in a lot of different ways where you just get a bunch of junk regions of pixels. And that explains more or less why you get junk results. Now, our previous iteration, or our first iteration of Azure OCR utilizes a Azure API called, I believe it's the Computer Vision API, to expose what is known as the read engine. And we can use that API to get to up to version 3.2. One of the big benefits, just right out of the gate, of using Azure DI OCR is it uses a separate service to expose the most recent version of the read engine, which is 3.0. So, as you're going to see eventually, just switching over to that new read engine produces a lot of benefits in terms of OCR results. But we're going to start here just with what we've seen in the past with read 3.2. And as you can see, hey, cool, we're getting a lot better results, right? I don't have to look at this document too closely to see that we're getting much better results, including a lot of this handwritten text. Great, right? Okay, let's switch over to our first look at Azure DI OCR now. Configuration is very simple. I want to point that out of the gate. One of the big benefits to either Azure OCR or Azure DI OCR is you don't have to put a lot of work into getting really good results. You don't have to do any kind of IP profile assignment, any kind of temporary IP cleanup with these engines because they work differently from traditional OCR engines. They use a wide variety of machine learning and a specific type of artificial intelligence called a convolutional neural network to analyze an image itself without having to do all this like wacky cleanup and pre-processing that traditional OCR engines do. So all I did for this OCR engine is just pick a model. We expose all of the pre-built models that the Document Intelligence Service gives back to us. And there's a lot, and I'm going to be very, very honest with you. Our initial iteration of Document Intelligence has focused on two: the pre-built read model and the pre-built layout model. And that's what we're going to be talking about today exclusively. It doesn't mean that these other pre-built models don't have benefits for Azure DIOCR. They probably have more benefits for Analyze, but for our initial development, we've really focused on these two. All right, so let's start with pre-built read. That's going to give you read version 4.0. And if we look at this document, I'm just going to be honest with you, it's not much different. So yeah, it does about as good a job as read 3.2 without a whole lot of difference. So at this point, you should be asking yourself, okay, what's the point? There's 2 points. One, because of the wide amounts of documents that these models are trained on by Azure, every iteration sees, quite frankly, just new problems and comes up with new solutions. So let's switch over to this document. This is just some kind of tax credit application from some county in Missouri. And yeah, transom, garbage. I didn't even have to bother redacting the owner's names on these documents because the OCR engine didn't even come close. Read does a little bit better, but noticed it missed one key piece of information, this parcel number. And Tim McMullen actually gave me this document set and, tried as he could to get read version 3.2 to recognize this parcel number. He just couldn't do it. Read 4.0, knocked it out of the park. Not even a problem. I came across this document as another example of just the read engine being a little bit better. This is a fax, basically. So you've got a really crummy quality in terms of the text here, right? Doesn't come as any surprise that Transom doesn't pick up anything besides just a bunch of junk. Read 3.2, okay, doing a little bit better. It's not giving us a bunch of junk. It's giving us a little bit more text, but still nothing really useful, right? Read 4.0, basically everything on the document. Misses a couple of things, but it was even able to get a couple of names that I had to redact from this document. Did a much, much better job. So again, this is kind of that evolution of OCR, right? Say 5-10 years ago, we had these traditional OCR engines that had very well-known problems. Modern engines like the read engine use different AI techniques to produce different results on a wide range of documents. And then each time Azure improves the model, you generally get improved results. The other big reason why you should probably migrate to Azure DIOCR if you're currently using Azure OCR, the API that is used to expose the 3.2 engine is being sunset by Microsoft in about 2.5 years. So it's not being sunset right now. You still got some time if you're still using it. But in the, fairly near future, our implementation of Azure OCR is going to go away, and we are going to exclusively use Document Intelligence to expose Azure's read engines. Any questions about that before we move into some more of the benefits of Azure Document Intelligence?
Yeah, we actually just got one sent in, and it is, how does the new Azure OCR engine produce table or line information in the Grooper layout JSON file?
That's an excellent question. The short answer is it doesn't. The longer answer is a lot of that understanding about a table structure is actually what that DI analyze activity does. But we'll get to that. Actually, we'll get to that right now. Thank you for teeing me up. So, the question very specifically had to do with stuff like line locations and how that gets stored in the layout data file that Grooper creates, right? If you guys have done any kind of OCR with Grooper, you know that one of the things that Grooper traditionally does is get Stuff like line locations, right? So like on this document right here, we picked up some horizontal lines. This is a totally mocked up document, by the way. Brilbo Braggins is not a real person. There's other types of layout data that Grooper can collect, checkbox location data, barcode, stuff like that, right? So the question is, how does Azure DI/OCR produce that data? Azure DI/OCR does not, actually. Grooper does. However, we have improved just the Azure Document Intelligence results by supplementing them with a second OCR pass behind the scenes that uses traditional OCR engines like Transom to, number one, collect layout data that Azure Document Intelligence cannot, and number two, supplement the text results with areas that we have identified that Azure Document Intelligence, or the read engine more generally, just does kind of a bad job at. And that's all controlled by these character data alignment set of properties. You don't actually have to configure any of this. Grooper will run that transom pass behind the scenes regardless, using kind of a built-in OCR profile. But you do have the option of configuring a specialized one if you so choose. But as we saw with this document here, in terms of the data that you're seeing in front of you, Document Intelligence, or specifically the Read 4.0 engine, is giving you all the text data. Grooper's secondary transom pass is the thing that is collecting this layout data. Now, as we'll talk about towards the end of this webinar, there is some additional types of layout data that Azure Document Intelligence produces by itself, and we'll see that can also get merged with the full layout data, but specifically lines itself, that's all coming from Grooper. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Yes, I'll let you know if there are any more coming in.
Perfect. So let's talk about some of the other supplemental results that running a secondary OCR pass gives for you. I'm probably not going to go through all of this because we are running a little bit shorter on time than I thought we would by now. But I just want to show you a couple of examples of what Grooper is doing behind the scenes with that OCR data alignment. So I'm actually going to test recognition on this so that we can get to our diagnostics. We've also improved the diagnostics generated for Azure DI/OCR over Azure OCR. So it's a lot, in my opinion, easier to see what Grooper is doing behind the scenes to supplement results. So I'm going to pop into these diagnostics and just show you what Grooper can do for you. So as far as all the Azure stuff, that's coming from these Azure words. One of the things that we did with this synthesis with the Azure DI, the read engine results and the transom results, was correcting the word positions. In 3.2, that was very, very important. I will say the 4.0 version of the read engine does a lot better with character positions. So, Grooper's giving you a little bit of adjustment in terms of these character positions, but not as much as the 3.2 engine. Where it's really helping is identifying, basically known areas where Azure just doesn't do a great job. And in particular, it seems to struggle with what I call these data-dense documents. There's not like a whole lot of text. There's not a whole lot of natural language on this document, right? It's just a bunch of numbers, right? And what we have noticed on documents like this is Azure just kind of doesn't do a great job when it comes to certain things. So you'll see here, Azure picked this up as 00 instead of 0.00. It's a minor adjustment, but sometimes those minor adjustments can mean all the world if your extractors aren't hitting, right? It is just something that kind of massages that accuracy, even one step further. Yeah, here we go. It picked up this as 471.1.1 point, right? That's not a number. That's obviously not what this value is. We were able to, basically use that supplemental process behind the scene to identify these known patterns that are, not as great in Azure and replace them with transom results. You'll see on other documents, I'm not going to test them because in the interest of time, I want to get to some other stuff. Azure will drop out single characters a lot, like this single one. If transom picks it up, it will insert it, kind of supplementing those results even further. Okay, any questions about that before we move on to some of the more outrageous things that Document Intelligence can do?
No questions.
Perfect. Okay, so right now, all we've talked about so far is, basically the document intelligence gives you access to Read 4.0, which is Read 3.2, better, more improved, the updated version, right? That alone, in my opinion, is a good reason to switch over to Azure DIOCR. But connecting to document intelligence gives us a lot more options as well. One of the things that you can do once you're connected to Azure Document Intelligence is utilize more models, right? And again, we're focusing on 2 for this initial development phase. But the pre-built layout one is one you really want to take some time getting to know. This is a model that is, basically custom built to do document analysis. Now, the read engine, it can do pretty much anything, right? I mean, if you take a picture of a street sign, it could read the text off that street sign. Layout is more specifically tuned towards what we do in the world of intelligent document processing and OCRing, but also analyzing actual paper documents, forms, contracts, anything, right? One of the big benefits to using this layout engine is it does a really, really good job by itself of locating checkboxes. So I'm just going to run through a few examples and just show you the difference here. So this is a document we've seen before. Yeah, I mean, Transom using Grooper's built-in checkbox detection does a pretty good job, but doesn't get everything, right? It missed that checkbox right there. It missed that checkbox right there. These things that are not like fully enclosed boxes, it didn't even attempt to get. Azure DIOCR knocks it out of the park. Every checkbox on this document, it's able to identify very, very easily and store to that Grooper layout data so it can be used by Grooper extractors down the road. This is actually came from a client that was having some problems with questionnaires that they were receiving. And, Grooper did okay, but it did not do an excellent job all the way, right? So yeah, I mean, it's missing some key checked boxes here. Azure DIOCR, again, every single one of these checkboxes it was able to recognize. It can recognize stuff like filled in radio buttons on this hand printed form. Knows that's a checkbox, knows that's a checked box. It can identify even printed checkbox styles that Grooper's built-in OMR detection has not traditionally done a great job at. So here, this kind of checkboxes, Grooper doesn't do a great job, obviously. Either doesn't recognize it or recognizes that it checked when it shouldn't. Azure DIOCR knocks it out of the park. Stuff like this, Grooper's never been able to do because that's not a fully enclosed checkbox. Again, Azure DIOCR is a lot better at recognizing these different types of what Azure actually calls selection marks. And oh, hey, bonus here. We've seen this document before, right? Notice these are actually, Notice these are actually checkboxes. I didn't even see this the first time looking at this document. I had to zoom real close in like this. Azure DIOCR not only gets those checkboxes, but hey, because we're using a different model that is more tuned towards different types of documents, our OCR results are actually a little bit better too. Notice we didn't pick up yes with Read 4.0. We didn't pick up NA with Read 4.0. We did with the layout model. Okay. There's one big thing I have to mention before you just start using the layout model on all of your documents. It is more expensive. When it comes to the pricing here, the Read model should be as expensive as it's always been. Read 3.2 and the Read model and document intelligence using Read 4.0. It's fractions of a penny per page. All of the pre-built models, and that includes the layout model, basically boil down to a penny a page. So it is more expensive. It is more expensive, and that is something that you will need to evaluate in terms of your cost-benefit analysis. If it is really critical that you get these checkbox locations, then yeah, you might want to use the layout model. If you don't have checkboxes and the Read 4.0 model works great for your text, yeah, use that because it's going to be a lot cheaper. Any questions about that before we move on?
Nope, none currently.
Okay. We're running a little bit later than I wanted to. So I'm going to try and wrap this up quickly with just a couple other things I want to point out. And we'll definitely have a second part on this next month. We'll talk about probably a couple of things with Azure DIOCR, but then a lot of stuff with the DI analyze activity. Last couple of things I want to mention before we wrap it up for today is these models have some optional features. These are add-on features that can be enabled one by one. There are only 2 of these features that pertain to Azure DI OCR. The rest of these will impact the full document analysis file that DI Analyze creates. But if you're just dealing with OCR, there's only 2 that apply: barcodes and OCR high resolution. Barcodes is free. There is no additional cost in terms of your Azure spend, but I do want to point out OCR high resolution does come with a slightly additional cost, $6 per 1,000 pages there. Okay, let's get back. I also want to point out you can use this barcode feature with both the read model and the layout model. You don't have to use the layout model to get barcode data. If you're like, man, shucks, I got these documents and they got barcodes, but they don't have checkboxes. I don't really want to use the layout model. You don't have to. You can use the read model and enable the barcode feature. And as far as how this stacks up against Grooper's built-in barcode detection, there's one really obvious benefit I've seen in my testing of document intelligence using Azure DI OCR. We've seen this before where users will have these data matrix barcodes, and we do have a data matrix reader in Grooper, but if the document is poor resolution or this barcode is just very, very, very small, Grooper's ability to recognize those barcodes are poor, quite frankly. Using the read engine with barcodes enabled here, we were able to pick that up no problem. There's even kind of wacky stuff like this where Grooper can recognize this barcode, but if you use kind of default settings, it ends up not being able to for reasons why I don't have time to get into right now. You probably could do it if you did a lot of custom IP, but again, it's a lot of work, right? If you just enable that barcode feature, you will see that the read engine with barcodes enabled will pick it up. No problem. This is all dummy data, by the way. Don't worry. The last thing I want to point out is I'd say, probably downside of Azure's barcode capabilities is they just have less symbologies that they can target than Grooper. Grooper's got 30-something symbologies that it can potentially recognize. Azure's read engine has, about a dozen. These are the most common, but if you are trying to recognize a barcode not on this list, Azure's not going to do it. That said, because we run that transom subpass along with the read engine or the layout engine, if you're using that one, Grooper basically gets you the best of both worlds, where it can get you something like this, which is a postnet barcode that Azure can't recognize, but can also get you this teeny tiny data matrix barcode that Grooper's innate barcode detection didn't get. So not only do you get those great Azure results, but you also get that additional pass with Grooper using a traditional OCR engine and some of our own IP to supplement results it can't get on its own. Very last thing I want to mention before we wrap up today has to do with that high-res OCR option. This has already happened once or twice with some of our own users testing this internally. You might think, oh, hey, cool. We've got a high OCR resolution feature. I'm just going to turn that on for every document I OCR, and you're going to get better results. That's not actually the case in most of our testing so far. You might get some better results, but I want to tell you it's not going to be drastically different, at least in the testing I've seen. And again, it does come at an additional cost. So this is an add-on feature that if you enable, you will be charged a little bit more in your Azure spend. Even a document like this, which is supposed to be what this feature was designed for. It was supposed to be designed for large, high-resolution documents like this engineering schematic. And the pass here is basically Azure Read with regular resolution. The pass here is Azure Read with high resolution. There's a few differences. It picks up a few more characters, but it's not super drastic. So all that to say, be wary of just enabling that feature just willy-nilly. Certainly if you find a good use case for it, that's great. Let us know. We would love to hear about it. But at least in our initial testing, keeping that property disabled seems to give you a pretty good benefit. Okay. I went a little bit over, guys. I apologize for wasting the last few minutes of your day here, but I think we can wrap it up there. The big thing that I wanted you guys to take away from this is Azure DI OCR is a new OCR engine option in Grooper that leverages the Azure Document Intelligence service. Its primary goal is getting text data and layout data, whether that comes from Azure or comes from Grooper. It is all supplemented together into that layout data file that can be used downstream. It offers two very, very good models that we've done some initial testing on. The read model is great if you just want text only, maybe some barcodes. The layout model is great if you want text and also OMR checkbox locations. And with that, I think we can wrap it up, but I do want to leave some time for questions. If anybody has, please ask. I'll be happy to stay on for a few more minutes.
No, that's it. We just have some comments that they're looking forward to the Azure Document Intelligence analysis session.
Yep, and that should be coming at the end of next month. I've got to get together a couple of stuff so I can show you the most benefit that you're going to get out of that. But it's pretty cool. I've seen some really good benefits, not just in terms of the accuracy that AI Analyze can get with DI Analyze, but also it's looking like it's really helping solve some of the highlighting problems that you get when you use an AI. So aligning that LLM response back to something on the document that can actually be highlighted for a reviewer. We'll talk about both of those things next month when we talk about DI Analyze.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. We will send out an email with the link to watch this on demand if you would like. We'll send that out here in the next couple of days. And until then, thank you for joining, and we'll see you at the next one.
All right. Appreciate it, guys.